Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome everyone to the webinar on cooking energy in displacement settings landscaping. My name is Ranisha Basnet, and today I'll be your moderator for this webinar. This webinar is organized jointly by GIZ in collaboration with the UNHCR, NDEF, UNITAR, GPA, MEX, Clean Cooking Alliance, and is funded by the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Before I dive deeper into the webinar for today, I want to invite my colleague Natalie from GIZ, who is going to give a short note about why are we doing this webinar and the objectives behind this webinar series. So Natalie, I'll request you to unmute yourself and quickly share the keywords.
Thank you, Ranisha, and hello everyone to this first webinar of this series. The goal of this Cooking Energy Workshop series is to advocate for sustainable cooking energy access through market-based approaches in a humanitarian support system. For that, I'm happy that we today start all together with this webinar by identifying the opportunities and challenges in the cooperation of different actors. In the next webinar, we hope to create a solid overview on different cooking systems and their pros and cons. And in the third webinar, we finally will speak more about delivery models that can accommodate humanitarian support, as well as a long-term perspective for local economies. This workshop series shall not only create and transfer knowledge, but also allow us to understand what each of us needs to do, how we can improve partnerships and close gaps in cooperation to make cooking energy systems safe, accessible, and sustainable for refugees and the host community. One important note here: why do we focus on cooking energy system and talk about cooking energy systems, and what does it mean? We need to stop talking only about cooking stoves, because the global cooking energy crisis cannot be solved through stoves alone. A cooking energy system, therefore, includes, first of all, the user. The user decides what, how, and where to cook, and has a strong influence on efficiency and fuel consumption. A cooking system also consists of fuel, because no cook stove can cook without fuel. And finally, and of course, a cooking energy system also includes a stove that needs to fit the available fuel, the food which is being cooked, and the cooking habits of the user. And finally, the system also includes ventilation, which has a high influence on health and efficiency. We have to focus on the entire cooking energy system because we need to find holistic solutions to tackle the cooking energy challenge in displacement settings.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for giving us a keyword and also telling us why we need to focus on the topic and why are we starting with this webinar series. So now let's kickstart with the webinar for today with a few housekeeping rules. As you know, we are using the GoToWebinar software. So on your control panel on the right side, you should have a button called questions. Please use this button, this chat box or this question box to type in your questions. And what we will do is during the panel discussions or after the presentations, we will then forward the question to the respective speakers. So please do use this option. In case you are using a tablet or a mobile device, then it might look a bit different. So that would be this another picture that's sideways, which has a question like a mark on it. So that would be the option you'd find on your tablet or your mobile phone. So please use that option to send us your questions. And you can send us the questions throughout the webinar and we'll try to answer as much as possible. So now let's have a quick look at today's agenda. Today we will kickstart with an overview presentation about the cooking sector, which was given by our colleague from MEX. Then we have a short video message from a refugee representative. And after that, we'll dive deeper with the panel discussions with representatives from different sectors. And finally, we will have a Q&A round. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our first presenter for today, Dr. An Tran from Modern Energy Cooking Services, MEX. An is the International Liaison Manager and the co-lead of the International Humanitarian Work Stream for MEX. So An, the floor is yours. I'm going to quickly switch to your presentation so that you can proceed with it.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Ranisha. I'm very honoured to be presenting an overview of the humanitarian cooking system. I work for MEX, the Modern Energy Cooking Services, a 5-year a UK aid-funded project. What I would like to do at the beginning is set the scene of where we are at the moment. We all know the numbers, that there are about 18 million displaced people in the world who are in situations where about 90% are still cooking with little or no access to adequate cooking fuels and technologies. Konjit will be discussing how, from the Ethiopian Clean Cooking Association, that refugee crisis today is no longer an emergency situation, but they are seen to be long-term, and we need to have long-term strategies. Displaced people have many, many challenges, and one of the most important challenges is to feed themselves. Right? And Diana here will be discussing that cooking access is actually a mandate for protection. It's no longer a matter of just about energy and environment, it's actually protection. Today I had an experience where I was in a situation where there was someone else out there that was aiming to harm me, and the actual fear of actually going to a place where, if you needed to collect firewood or fuel, that place, imagine that you would have your children, yourself, needing to go to this place where you fear your livelihoods and your safety. That is the situation that many displaced people fear today. So the understanding that we want to challenge at MEX is that, do we really need to look at just biomass fuels? There are other options within the landscape, and we all cook with more modern fuels, that's such as gas and electricity. And so why in the humanitarian sector is cooking fuel still based on biomass fuels that are collected outside of sites, or that are dangerous for the health of the people cooking? So I'd like to flick next to the next slide, Renisha. At MEX, we are challenging the current paradigm that humanitarian cooking needs to just look at biomass. We'd like to challenge that. Currently, a research project by my colleagues Oana and Long Sen have looked at 21 examples of modern energy cooking in humanitarian sector, looking at solutions from LPG to electricity to biogas and ethanol. And there are some challenges here, and mostly they're based on the whole large ecosystem. It's not really based on the technology itself. A lot of it is already in existence. So Ben and Judith are going to challenge the paradigm that not only is the challenge of cooking in humanitarian sector wider than just the technology, it's about the collaborations and about working with different stakeholders. Financing mechanisms is a really important step to enabling the cooking sector to change this narrative. New things such as carbon financing, pay-go, crowdfunding and concessions, innovative financing models have only become really prevalent now that we have very smart technologies such as smart meters and the ability to pay-go with mobile money. So I would like to ask all the panelists to not only investigate within the sphere that they're looking at, that modern energy, biomass cooking, and other technologies are just the beginning, and that it actually requires a whole ecosystem. Fundamental to all this in the cooking system is the policies, that there is a right for cooking access, and the rights not only for the cooking access, but for the displaced people and refugees to work. And from my background, I was conceived in a refugee camp, and the thought that the community here have no access to cooking services beyond them, that to feed themselves is a travesty. And we have a very amazing group of humanitarian energy specialists out there that are pushing the boundaries, and I challenge you to push the boundaries here, that not only to look at biomass improved cooking stoves, but to look at modern energy cooking solutions as well. So thank you very much, Renisha.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'll quickly change to my presentation. Sorry about that. And thank you once again for setting the scene and again highlighting why we need to talk about it. And now moving forward, we have a short video message from one of our refugee representative. So I'm going to play that video message. In case you cannot hear it or if there is any problem with the sound, just try turning up the volume and the video will play shortly now.
This is Cody Shinan. She's 27 years old and from South Sudan. She's living in Rhino Camp, Uganda. What were your experiences regarding cooking when you came to the camp?
The settlement was a tough place of experience for me and my mother. In addition to other challenges, we would miss meals because my mother was facing challenges with fuels for cooking and even lacked the right stoves to use.
What has changed since then?
I joined the GIZ cooking demonstration activities and was given 2 stoves to train and make awareness to other households on making choices. One stove was for charcoal and the other was firewood. Other than helping my mother, these stoves have been useful because we have been using little available firewood and charcoal, and OPM stopped us from making charcoal on the settlement.
How do you cook currently and what would you like to see in the future?
Many people in the settlement have now bought the stoves and stopped using the local 3-stone cooking system, but it is still common to see in our area here some houses using both, because my mother cannot mingle cassava on the charcoal and wood stoves which the companies have introduced. We would wish to have fixed stoves in our houses to allow cooking local foods better. In addition to the stoves which the companies are selling, I would request GIZ and other partners to train us to make our own stoves and build the fixed ones that my mother prefers.
This interview has been dubbed afterwards.
So welcome back after the short video message. And now it's time for some polls. We want to get to know you, the audience, better. So our first poll questions should pop up on your screen. And please tell us, how are you involved in the cooking space? Are you more into producing, stoves, fuels, implementing, research, funding, policies, and so on? Then you can also choose multiple options in case you're involved in different sectors. So we're going to leave the poll for another, let's say, 20 seconds, because I can see a lot of votes are coming in. So another few seconds. So it's your last chance to vote. Let's vote, people. And now I will close the poll and display the results. So as we can see, most of our audience today are working in research, followed by implementing and distribution of cook stoves, and then followed by policy, funding, and producing. Thank you so much for taking part in the polls. And now we have a second poll question for you. So why do you think the vast majority of people in displacement settings still cook on open fire? So there are different options such as cooking solutions not accessible, affordable, not adapted to the local context, not provided by humanitarian aid, lack of corporations, or people are comfortable with using open fire. So let's leave the poll for another 20 to 30 seconds. So another few more seconds as the votes are coming in. So last few seconds, people. So if you haven't voted, so please vote for the different options. And now I'll close the poll and display the results. So most of our audience today think that the main reason is because cooking solutions are either not accessible or not affordable, followed by they are not being adapted to the local context, or people are more comfortable using open fire. Thank you so much for taking part in the poll, and actually that's also a cue for me to now move to the panel discussion where we will be talking about these different causes, the different reasons that we just you selected in the polls. And to start off with, we have a stellar lineup of panelists today who are from different sectors. So we will have a variety of opinions and discussions on the panel. And I would now like to quickly introduce each one of our panelists. And as I introduce, I would request you to switch on your camera and your microphone. Unfortunately, our first panelist, Rafaela from World Food Programme, has not been able to join us today. So then I would like to welcome our second panelist, that is Diana Binato, who is working as an energy officer at UNHCR. Diana has over a decade of professional expertise in renewable energy, rural development, and social enterprises, and her experience ranges in different countries across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Then I would like to welcome Ben Butler, who is the lead technical advisor for GIZ ESDS Uganda. Ben is working with GIZ on coordination of and development of sustainable solutions for energy access through market-based approaches. Then I would like to invite Jolene Hanke, who is a Congolese refugee from Kakuma Camp, Kenya, and the co-founder of Refugee Artist and Author. She's also a refugee activist and a passionate champion of SDG 7. And furthermore, I would like to welcome Konjit Neguso, who is the director of the Ethiopian Clean Cooking Alliance. And Konjit has been working for more than 17 years in the clean cooking sector in different positions, in different organizations such as GIZ Ethiopia and Practical Action Consulting. And finally, I would like to invite Judith Joan Walker, who is the COO of African Clean Energy. Judith, via ACE, African Clean Energy, is focused on providing new technologies and best practices for distributing RE technologies that put the focus on excellent customer service and accurate data collection. She was also named the 2016 Forbes Top 30 Under 30. So welcome one more time to all our excellent panelists. And I will quickly stop sharing my screen so that we can see all our panelists on the screen. Sorry, one quick second so that I can quickly stop sharing my screen. Perfect. Now that we have all of you in one frame, perfect time to get started with our panel discussion. So maybe we can kickstart by knowing a little bit more about your organization. So if you could kickstart and tell me, where do you work at? And what are the main aims/objective of your organization with regard to clean cooking in humanitarian settings? So maybe I start with Diana. Ben, I follow the same row as I see on my screen. So Diana, please go forward.
Yes, thank you, and welcome everybody. So I'm Diana Benato, as I was presented, Energy Officer in UNHCR, and the UNHCR is the UN Refugees Agency. It's a global organization mandated to provide international protection, assistance, and solution to refugees, but or not only refugees, but also their host community and other people of concern of UNHCR. As Anna was introducing before about the protection part of the cooking access, so UNHCR has a strong protection mandate, and so this protection mandate is the core of any UNHCR interventions. So, and cooking access is considered from a right-based approach and is considered as a basic need. So for protection, we mean like protection risk, as I say, Anna was really giving us a good example before. We can consider, like, for example, the fear to go collecting firewood outside and the fear for SGBV. or maybe we can also talk about the tension with the host community that often raise due to competition over limited natural resources, and as well the associated environmental impact. So all of these and more protection risk can be mitigated by access to sustainable cooking fuel and resilience technology. So for this importance of the cooking aspect and cooking access for refugees, this aspect, this topic, the cooking, is the second objective of the UNHCR Global Energy Strategy. So this is my introduction for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Then we move to Ben. Ben, you're muted, so we can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself.
Thank you for reminding. Yeah, good afternoon and good morning to all colleagues. My name, as you mentioned, is Ben Butler. I work for JZ in Uganda. The project I work for is the displaced solutions, energy solutions for displaced settings in the refugee settlements in Uganda, as well as for energizing development. The energy portfolio in Uganda is JZ Energy Portfolio in Uganda is responsible for undertaking a wide spectrum of energy activity, including the market development and ensuring that there is energy access and quality energy access for the refugee settings. That's both for the refugees and the host communities. The nature of our work portfolio is work through partners. Our key partners in country is the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, as well as UNHCR and the Office of the Prime Minister responsible for refugee and disaster preparedness. Beyond that, then we also work through private sector partners who take initiative to penetrate into the refugee markets and be able to establish and set up market-based approaches. We work closely with other implementing partners directly under UNHCR through a platform or the forum we call Work Green, which is a platform that brings together all energy and environment partners in the country that have been impacting on the refugee settlements. And also we work with the other alliances and coalitions like the Smart Community Coalition. The focus here is all to try and build synergies and be able to improve the work, the enabling environment, as well as improve on the energy services that reach the last mile. So our main approach in doing this is
Ben, maybe we come back to the approach in a while. First, let's have a quick round and see what different companies and organizations are doing.
Cool. Yeah,
Sounds good. Perfect. No worries. Then we move to Judith. Maybe you could talk a bit about your organization, Africa Clean Cooking, and then talk about what is the main aims and objective with regard to the humanitarian cooking space.
Thank you very much. I'm Judith Joan Walker. I'm the COO of African Clean Energy. We're actually manufacturers, distributors, pre-financers, and provide customer service in 4 countries, Lesotho, Uganda, Kenya, and Cambodia at the moment. And what we produce and distribute is a high-tech biomass cook stove with forced ventilation and all the services around that, with the inclusion of solar energy so that people are also able to power an LED light, to charge mobile devices and such. So it's a bit of a hybrid solar biomass cooking system. We're also looking at sustainable biomass fuels in the regions that we work, and we're looking at advanced digital technologies in order to create better systems of distribution, so pay-as-you-go, but also being able to monitor usage so that our M&E capacity is even further improved. We do a lot of data collection because we really do want to target households that currently have very limited access to energy and to bring both electricity and thermal cooking energy to them. In Uganda, we have recently launched our project Prospers, which is promoting solar-powered energy-efficient stoves in Chingwali refugee settlement. That was funded by DRA, the Dutch Relief Association, and is in partnership with CARE and KRC. KRC being Kabarole Research Center, who are establishing briquetting business program as part of this project. And our approach there is we're trying to find market-based approaches to distribute in a similar way that we do in more the regular sort of development context, but being able to essentially subsidize and monitor the distribution of our products in a humanitarian context, both to refugee households and to host communities, without disrupting the local context. So we're doing so through our URB. So our it's a model of referral. It's a user referral model in both the host community and the refugee households, a user recommendation bonus, URB, and it's a referral program in which the level of involvement with the program essentially subsidizes the product for the end user, and that way we're able to do so without disrupting. This is something that we're testing in Chingwali at the moment. I'm happy to tell a lot more about it, but our goal really in the humanitarian context is how can private sector come in without disrupting local markets, at the same time ensuring that we are able to bring high-tech solutions in a way that can be closely monitored and evaluated in the long term as well. And then, of course, in collaboration with organizations that are on the ground.
Thank you so much, Juliet. And I will definitely come back to you to know more about the model that you are testing, and we will definitely follow up on that in the follow-up questions. Then maybe we move to Konjit. So Konjit, if you could also quickly talk about the Ethiopian Clean Cooking Alliance and what is the main aims and objective with regard to the humanitarian cooking space.
Thank you, Ranisha, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. The Ethiopian Clean Cooking Alliance is a civil society, and it aims to facilitate the scaling of clean cooking in Ethiopia through convening and coordinating the sector, advocating for enabling environment policy or strategies, raising public awareness and capacity building. So far, we have about 53 registered active members from private sector, NGO, government institutions, academia, association, and individual experts in the cooking sector, and it's led by the alliance is led by its General Assembly. The clean cooking sector in Ethiopia, both at refugee and outside the refugee, is highly influenced by several actors along the supply chain. And the alliance understands that the involvement of multiple actors in the context of public-private partnership as a development partner is an essential mechanism. So the alliance is working with several stakeholders who are influencing the clean cooking sector in humanitarian setups. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Konjit. Now we go back to you, Joella. So Joella, if you could explain how are you involved in the cooking space? Joella?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Jolene Hanke, as you introduced, and I'm so happy and honored to be part of this conversation today. Basically, let me say in the cooking space, mainly focusing on facilitating partners or other actors who feel like there is a big opportunity to operate in refugee settings, especially in Kakuma where I'm based. And I normally facilitate that on sharing data or giving them, facilitate the kind of collaboration between the organization and the community, and also trying to facilitate the supply chain, since most of the time getting people who are really involved into energy to understand the context of the the setup is very challenging. So most of the time I intervene also in that area to facilitate partners who are looking forward, working or extending their program into refugee camps. And that's one aspect, big aspect that I normally support partners to work on in the displacement settings. And finally, I also, as I said, I'm a champion of access to clean energy for all. And I just not focus on clean energy, but also for lighting as well, because that has been one of the challenges that those who have based in the refugee camps face, especially women and young children. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joella. As our audience can already see, we have such a huge variety of experiences and organizations on this panel. So I think what would be really interesting, since we know now a little bit about what your organization does, what is its aims and objective, it would be interesting to know a little bit more also about your approach, or how do you operate while reaching your goals. So since Ben already highlighted some of the partners, so maybe Ben, I kickstart with you. You already told us that GIZ ESDS is working with a range of partners. Maybe you could start and also tell us what are your approaches, or how do you operate for reaching your goal that GIZ ESDS has with regard to the clean cooking space?
Thank you once again, and as I already hinted on this, we have two-pronged approach. The first approach is to look at the enabling environment. Here we are focusing more into supporting the Ministry of Energy in the national policy reviews, energy policy reviews, and ensuring that the working frameworks exist to support development partners to be able to set up systems and be able to work in these conditions. Currently, what we are doing is supporting the same ministry to develop a refugee response plan, which is through a consultancy process, where we would like to ensure that there is a clear guideline and framework along which any development partner or implementing agencies can be able to pick a leaf and, for instance, look through the plan and be able to see what they can contribute to the general improvement of the energy access environment, as well as put resources together so that there is no duplication of activities and there is consistency and sustainability in doing this. The second approach is developing markets. This is more of looking at how the private sector can reach the last mile by focusing more on result-based frameworks, where, for instance, the entrepreneurs and private actors in the market can have a mitigation of the risks that they envisage, because refugee settlements are considered to be very risky business ventures, and therefore not so many actors from the private sector who are business oriented will be investing their resources. How do we then do the result-based framework? Our approach is in a way that we do not want to distort the existing market, and therefore the kind of subsidy that we provide is to strengthen the ability of the private sector to build the hubs, have a network of distribution, and be able to reach to the households as well as for productive users of energy who will ordinarily not be able to get these products from the nearest markets, which are, of course, very far from the refugee settlements. Generally, in Uganda, most of the refugee settlements are in rural settings, and therefore the opportunities for quality products to reach such markets are minimal. It's only then that you support the enterprise development and also as well promote livelihood for the refugee and host communities to be able to be dealers and agents to sell these products, and be able to also deal directly with the consumers, that is now the end users. That's when then you can realize that there is some penetration into that. So those are the two cardinal approaches. The additional thing we do is also to build energy kiosks. These are models that are very unique, and the purpose of doing this is to sort of provide a marketplace where products that all sorts of cooking energy products as well as lighting products can be accessed, and even services. Individuals or the households or maybe business people within the refugee settlements may not have sufficient knowledge about certain products. So the energy hubs act like a link from where they can be able to come and collect information on which product has what kind of advantages and benefits. And this is partly done through our broad spectrum of awareness programming that we do within the refugee settlement. So this is the way we are dealing with our approaches in the refugee settlements. And we are not directly implementers, but we try and influence those partners and individuals or traders who can be able to reach there by incentivizing them. I mentioned this earlier that the kind of incentive we provide, we are cognizant that we do not want to distort the market, because we already find individual traders within the settlements who are doing business. So if you provide a subsidy that is intended to reduce the market price or distort the market price, you may do more harm to the existing market, as well as even lay out the local traders who already earn their livelihood. So we are cognizant of this, and the approach we are taking therefore focuses in such a way that we address both pronged challenges.
Thank you so much. Just to sum that up, then would it be correct to say that especially with the market-based approaches that you took, all the initiatives are rather focused on the enabling environment, and the subsidies are rather focused on the market entry and not to disturb the market by subsidizing the product? Would that be correct to say?
That's very correct, because we are not using the pricing. We are only supporting them to expand and be able to do a bigger turnover.
Definitely, and I think that's the line that Juliet also already mentioned in her opening statement. So that's perhaps a cue to move to Juliet. And maybe Juliet, you could talk about what are your approaches and also which kind of partners do you work with?
Yeah, excellent introduction by Ben there, because I think it is very important indeed, especially as sort of private sector moves into humanitarian context, that we are very wary of how we do so, and that we work together with organizations such as GIZ. But as I mentioned, we're currently working with CARE and KRC in Chingwali refugee settlement, and very much along the lines of what Ben was describing, ensuring that our business model in those contexts isn't distorting the markets and not simply sort of blanket subsidizing. So that is where we designed the URB model, the user recommendation bonus. Essentially, every customer that we acquire, regardless of refugee status or household or host community, is offered the same package and the same incentives. And because we have a customer-facing app, which is called ACE Connect, which essentially acts as a pay-as-you-go device, it links our hardware with our database. It also monitors usage levels and maintenance issues. It allows us to keep very close contact with the households. And the entire system, so solar panel, the cooking stove, the phone, is sold as one bundle, as one package. It allows us to sort of leverage the digital technology to do things in a very different way. So ACE Connect not only acts as sort of like a loan management tool, but in the sense that the end user can see, you know, are they due any payments? Are they behind? Are they ahead? Are they how much is remaining balance? It also allows us to have other features, such as being able to order sustainable biomass fuels through the app itself for delivery, and that's how we're going to be able to partner together with KRC, where they're working with local community groups that are essentially making local biomass fuels. How can we link them to the end user? How can we ensure that locally produced fuels are reaching local local users of those fuels. Long story short, leveraging digital technology through those customer-facing apps that we're able to get in the hands of these households because they're able to pay that off over a longer amount of time. And how that ties into the URB model is that every time someone effectively refers a new household, so somebody who actually then also buys into this program, they can have a whole monthly payment knocked off of their payments, right? And the way that we're trying to set this up is to have it as close to a commercial model as possible. I don't know who in this call has used things like Uber, where if you refer a friend and they sign up and you get $5 and they get $5, we essentially want to leverage these kinds of commercial digital technology models and apply it in this context, including with fuel ordering and fuel delivery, including with that if you refer a friend, you get a whole payment off. Because in that way, we're not just sort of blanket subsidizing, we're using a commercially relevant model, something that would be scalable, even without sort of heavy subsidization, to make these products and services much more affordable for those that need it. It also means that the households that are most engaged with the program, that are referring people, that are more active ambassadors for the brand and are purchasing more fuels, can be rewarded digitally with these discounts and with these subsidies, right? So the more engaged you are, the cheaper it becomes for you, the more realistic and more affordable it becomes sort of a virtuous cycle, and also very much more a scalable and commercial model. Aside from that, and obviously we're piloting this currently in Chingwali, where we're looking at, is this a viable way? Will people do that at scale? Is that an effective way of subsidizing the full cost of it? We're also looking at other revenue streams to be able to, in a commercial sort of setting, subsidize the cost to the end user, specifically of things like biomass fuels, sustainable biomass fuels that are produced locally, in order to create additional revenue streams locally, generate sort of a local fuel economy so that we're not importing fossil fuels, but that we're sort of really stimulating very clean, sustainable fuels in the locations where we're also selling them, thus also reducing the carbon footprint thereof. Looking at things like carbon offsetting by sort of digitally verifying actual usage, so actual statistics from each household with sort of context indicators. So obviously we have to be very wary of privacy of the end user, but looking at what their baseline was. So are they migrating from things like charcoal, or did they have no access to electricity? What baseline indicators can we look at? How do we measure the actual impact through their usage, their level of engagement with the program and such, and how do we turn that into monetizable impact metrics such as carbon offset, and therefore subsidize those distribution networks, again, for the end user, creating a very, very virtuous cycle where money is continuously pumped back into the communities that are transitioning away from things like charcoal, which are environmentally really detrimental, and migrating towards other more sustainable local fuel sources. That is essentially what we're working on, which is many steps of a program. And I think especially interesting in a humanitarian context, because historically these sort of more advanced technologies have not been distributed because of the associated cost or the sort of ability to pay, and the difficulty in monitoring and evaluation, and sort of using the data and the apps and the databases that we have. We're able to do all those things in a much more integrated way without sort of being hugely disruptive, or without the need for constant and continuous really high levels of subsidy for these end users.
Thank you so much, Juliet. And now we move to you, Diana. So let's hear more about UNHCR's approaches for reaching their goals.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to go back a little to the protection aspect, not only because it's, let's say, the mandate of UNHCR, and so the core aspect where we base all our intervention, but let's say that the protection aspect is the root of the problem that we try to solve. And in this case, because we're talking now cooking, we try to solve providing access to appropriate technology and fuel. Okay, it could be any other solution, for example, water, or we talk about shelter, and we have many more solutions. Here, in this particular case, we're talking about cooking. So, so let's say, as I say, protection is the problem we try to solve, and cooking is, let's say, the solution now we are considering. So each cooking programs can be implemented in various scenarios approaches. So we have a lot of different methods, and all are based on the specific context. We have to consider many different possibilities how to reach, let's say, the people of concern and refugees and others. And so we can consider both in-kind or cash-based interventions. And we can also think about linking the cooking programs to livelihood opportunity if there is of course, if there is an enabling environment, as Ben was talking. And also we can look at the development sector, and at the same time there in the national policy and programs. So so this is to say that we operate really utilizing a wide scenario of approaches, depending on the specific context, where we can use a market-based approach, where we instead we have to move with in-kind solution, where is the market able to support cash-based intervention, and so we really have to analyze every specific situation. And based on the selected solution and approach, we collaborate with different partners. We have partnership with other humanitarian organizations, like, for example, okay, she is unfortunately here, but with WFP, we are in a partnership in a project that are looking at strengthening the capacity for climate adaptation of displacement population. We partner with other development actors, like, for example, here with the GIZ, the ESDS, that provide the vision, the long-term vision of project sustainability and the market-based approach. But we partner as well with government, the private sector, NGOs, anything, many more. Another example could be the Clean Cooking Alliance that is also here present as a panelist, and we previously collaborated in a project that was helping us defining procurement specifications, testing criteria, and methodology connected to cook stove cooking solution, biomass and LPG, and so on. So we have a variety of scenario and partnerships, all depending on the specific context and based situation by situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. Then we can move to Conjit. Then we pass the ball to you, Conjit. So if you could quickly talk about what are the approaches for Clean Cooking Alliance?
Yeah, thank you. Our approach is mainly focusing on creating enabling environment for clean cooking solutions. The Alliance is working to foster an enabling environment through leveraging advocacy, communication, capacity building, social mobilization, knowledge management, and networking. To mention some, when we say the advocacy, like we are trying to foster lobbying and catalyzing policy issues, dialogues, and harmonizing development partner support, besides securing the support of key constituents in relevant local, national, and international policy discussions. As I said the Alliance, it has been established 2 years back, and next, in a week time, it will be 2 years actually. But since we opened the office and being functional is about 1 year. And during this time, the Ethiopian government tried to revise the energy policy, and they have asked us to get some data on ethanol technologies. So we provided that, and we said that in a year time, at least we try to contribute this element, which is the main objective that we are established. The other is the communication. We drive uptake through awareness, accessibility, and behavioral change, doing promotional activities. The other is the capacity building, identifying and facilitate training support to the private sector and other stakeholders who are in the clean cooking era. And the other element is social mobilization, which is now to force the standard of technologies to adopt by the general public is one approach that we want to force. The knowledge management issue is encouraging to do research and development of clean cooking technologies and product designs. And through networking, we want to create, and we try to create business linkage between private sectors and between private sectors and the clients. The alliance is partnered with the Ethiopian Rural Energy Development and Promotion Center, which is part of the Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy. And we work also as a partnership. We work also with Addis Ababa University, SNV Ethiopia, and INDEV through financing. They provide us financing. And the Ethiopian Environment, Forest and Climate Change Commission also has been on board with the alliance. So our approach is to bring all stakeholders all together, and it is in our plan also to continue to work with. And so far, about 13 private sector are also working on supply cooking solutions, are members of the alliance, and we are partnering with them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Conjit, and congratulations on your upcoming second birthday for the Clean Cooking Alliance. And now I would like to move to Joella. So Joella, if you could explain if you have ever been involved in the development of a cooking systems, what was your experience with it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, basically working closely with actors that are bringing solutions, especially on cooking energy in displacement settings, gave me an opportunity to not just cooperating or collaborating with them, but also being involved in some of the critical steps that are really critical for the designing and bringing solution to that will fit the context of the place itself. And knowing that, each place or each camp has its own way to, a good approach that every, partner has to take into consideration. Personally, from my own experience, I've worked closely with SNV in Kakuma, and as you might know, SNV works with a lot of partners on board, since they are tackling a lot of challenges coming to energy for lighting, cooking, and other areas. And most of the time when they have a partner on board, like let me say recently they had a partner who was applying clean cooking ethanol, to refugees, and somehow it was like kind of a new product, and it's like kind of needs kind of awareness to the community so that they can be able to understand what the product all about, how to use it. And that's where I'm mostly involved, coming to the designing, because okay, of course some partners might come with a ready product. Some prefer coming with just starting afresh, collecting ideas and see how they can come up with a product that will match with the context of the local community and what people can afford, taking other factors into consideration. And mostly I've been involved in the designing of the product itself, And then on top of that, there is a big issue operating, as Ben mentioned, operating in displacement settings, because of most of the time they are located in remote areas, and having facilities that can facilitate the work of humanitarians and other private sector operating within the camp or the area has been very challenging most of the time. And that also aligns with the communication channel on how to get good data, like what to do, what to provide, how to do it. And on the other hand, how also to get the feedback from the consumers. And most of the time I've tried also to facilitate that area, mostly on getting feedback, because once a project is introduced in a refugee camp, there is always that step where people have to sit down and see, is there a way to improve? Is there a way to see what are the feedback from the consumers, and how we can make our services much better than what we are currently providing. So have been also involved in communication before the projects being launched in the camps, during the because there is that awareness stage also, and then after people are used now to the product, what are they saying, what are the feedback, and also looking at working on the sustainability of the project itself. Yeah, that's how I've been involved, mostly coming to cooking system in the camps. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joella. As we can already see, there are a wide range of approaches in the panel, ranging from market-based interventions to provide using consumer referrals methods, to combining it with data, to working directly with the communities, or looking at it from a protection or cash-based transfers. So my next question to my panelists is, since we have such a variety of approaches, I'm assuming the challenges are also going to be very different, but along with the challenges, there will also be opportunities. So my next question to you is, from your experience so far, what are the biggest challenges that you see? And what would be the opportunities that you see to overcome that challenge or to move the sector forward? So maybe I go, as I see on my screen, I start with you, Diana.
Yes, thank you. Yes, there are challenges indeed everywhere. The biggest challenge that I would like to talk here today, it's more from a technical point of view, and is that there is no one-size-fits-all solution for the cooking access. So this means that each context must be analyzed individually. So this what does mean that it require an adequate resources allocation, and for resources I'm talking about not only the financial resources but also human, and also the knowledge to do how to do it, how to implement it, and what is the best solution. And so explain better. It requires an adequate resources allocation in determining various aspects of the cooking needs. And we know that in the cooking sector, there are a lot of different variables. It can be the budget, the supply chain available in the location, the technology itself, but as well like the cultural acceptance of the user, and then the adaptability, how much also these cook stove or the cooking intervention can be modified and adapt to the context, the availability, and so many, even like the environmental part. So there are really many, and each of them has to be analyzed individually. So this means that in order to optimize resource allocation and so leverage experience from the energy sector, UNHCR work with a variety of actors to overcome this challenge. This challenge that, as I say, is already a big challenge in situation that we can call it protracted situation, and it became even bigger in emergency, during an emergency response, where basically there is the need to act in a time frame of few days and to be ready to deploy life-saving support in large quantity. So in this case, there is no time for a detailed assessment of setting a long-term plan. So again, even here, this is why we also have this range of approaches, because we really have to see in which situation we are operating in order to bring the right, more sustainable and suitable solution for the context where we are operating. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I really liked what you said. One size does not fit all. We have different cooking solutions at home, so why shouldn't there be also in a refugee settlement? Thank you so much. Now maybe I move to you, Ben. So you talked about market-based interventions and other approaches that GIZ does. So maybe you could also talk about what are the challenges and opportunities that you see along the way to tackle those challenges.
Definitely in implementing any approach, you always encounter hurdles, and some of these are risks that you already envisage while you are doing the planning and strategy development. So you provide an advanced kind of mitigation measures. However, there are also those challenges that inadvertently come as a result of different actors in play. For instance, we have learned from most of the private entrepreneurs about the question of market distortion as a result of free handouts. This is quite common. While from the perspective of UNHCR, they provide the handouts of energy products and services to persons with special needs. But there is also the element of the other development partners not to draw their funding from UNHCR. And therefore, they have the liberty to invest these funds to bring in products and at most times give them as handouts. You will find that oftentimes development partners distributing the same kind of stove products or lighting systems that are in the market, that are meant to build a sustainable market for which in the absence or in the future where development partners do not have funding for this, they will of course by themselves be existing. So this challenge is one of the key things that influence whether an entrepreneur is willing to take up a venture into such a system or not. The other challenge related to this aspect is about the inability to pay. You find of course, the disposable income levels for most refugees and host communities is very low, whereas there are high value products, like we mentioned in the beginning and even in the polls, there could be so many technologies and systems introduced, but because of the nature of refugee settings and the host communities having low disposable incomes, they are unable to acquire some of these products. For instance, if you talk of LPG, if you talk of any energy cooking technology, they will still refer you to in terms of the cost. So what we do in this case, we're encouraging the private entrepreneurs to, as much as possible, develop financing mechanisms, including pay-go systems, so that they can be able to attract the market where they pay in installments. But this comes also with an alternative challenge related to this, that is the volatile or what I would consider as the unstable clients. Some of the refugees you find, for instance, in a Rhino camp settlement, after like 1 year or two, will move to join a relative or part of the family who is living in Bidi or another settlement, without, for instance, already completing payment for this. Therefore, the entrepreneur will not be able to recover his funds. That is one of the reasons why actually we mitigate this through the subsidies. We then say, okay, in this case, if you are unable to recover fully, then that means because the funds that you get to set up the hubs should be able to recover or recoup the deficits you incur as a result of losses as a result of that. Another challenge related to that is most of these settlement locations have very poor communication networks. Internet is poor. And for you to introduce a pay-go system where, for instance, the client pays through a mobile money or any method of payment, requires that he must actively have a working telephone and be able to send these installments on time. And therefore, this also contributes a lot to that kind of challenge. The other challenge I also noticed, which as a result of is the short-term funding from UNHCR to the implementing partners. That 1 year cycle in which most of these development partners receive funding from UNHCR implies that they must implement only activities that they can account for and they can report on at the close of every financial year. So they cannot invest in long-term plans. And yet developing market requires 3-4 year plan where you can sustainably build on what is initiated in the previous year strategy. This is not very possible, and we quite often in our synergy meetings, in the platform meetings, bring this up, but we find, of course, genuinely all these actors have a reason that this is not workable. For instance, go to the production of biomass, which is the main fuel. It's easy to set up, for instance, a briquetting plant by a partner for an entrepreneur, but then how long will this investment last? It can be 1 year cycle, then the subsequent year, you find this partner is not on the list of funding for the coming year, and these structures are just left unused, or they can't even sustain production in the subsequent year. So therefore, there's that gap bridging between humanitarian and development nexus still remains a huge challenge that needs to be discussed further and see how best we can together work to bridge this. These are some of the key challenges that we interface with day to day with the partners.
Thank you, Ben. I just have a short follow-up question to that. What about counterfeit products distorting the market? Is that something your partners encounter a lot?
So that's also something I missed out to mention, is that there are lots of porous borders through which local traders bring in products that are not certified and they are not trademarked. And this, in general, generically are very cheap because they have no known country of origin. And therefore, because of their appearances being similar to a standardized product, they sort of like then cut down the price to either half or even much lower than that. So these counterfeits tend to take much of the market space because the local communities, the clients from the community, do not easily differentiate a good, authentic stove or a solar product from the fake one. What this implies is that when this client has bought a fake product, which is not a clear brand but the same color, and then after 1 month, 2 months, it has broken down, then he will be discouraged. There's the snowball effect of this, where, for instance, you'll tell the next neighbor, these products are not helpful. And therefore, they revert back to the old way of how they have been cooking, and they are not able to be encouraged, even when you bring in awareness programs, demo programs to try and demonstrate to them what is different from that. There is that already communication between client to client that affects decision making so much. So this is a common thing. As a country, for instance, in Uganda, I think this challenge still remains a major one, because even when the Revenue Authority looks at products that come through the right channels, but the National Bureau of Standards can only certify things that pass through the Revenue Authority. They cannot know which products have penetrated the market, and they have no enforcement mechanism to retrieve them from the market. So the market is almost halfway infiltrated with products that do not necessarily make a market sense and they're low value. That is the basic challenge in related to that.
Thank you so much, Ben. And there are so many challenges that I highlight, which would make sense to pass it to Judith, especially the communications and so on. So Judith, when you talk about the challenges, maybe you could also talk from your own experience from Uganda, since you are implementing a lot of digital solutions there.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting, both in what Diana and what Ben said. Just I do recognize a lot of these challenges, so it's great points of discussion. The first point in regards to data, indeed, this is a challenge, and it's something that in our projects and our pilots, at least, we try to ensure we mitigate by ensuring that the devices are distributed, that we cover the cost of data so that we can test variables in a little bit of a bubble, right? So we are trying to test a URB model. We're not trying to test whether people are going to consistently buy data. So we try to mitigate some of the risks and the variables in how we design our projects. And that's sort of the benefit of being able to implement it on a project basis together with partners on the ground with a more limited scope, so that in our piloting phase of introducing these products, we know exactly what questions we're trying to answer, and it's almost in a safe space to test those variables. Because indeed, sort of rolling out at scale, we are going to see those challenges. The challenges will be different in every area that we operate in. They have been, we're active in Mbale and in Gulu. We're setting up in Fort Portal, Chingwali, and Hoima. So we know that there's differences. Context is everything. We operate in 4 different countries. It is worlds apart, even between, Lesotho in Southern Africa and Kenya, in Uganda and Cambodia. They're so different in their context, in the way that we need to approach people, in levels of network, digital technology, digital literacy, what fuels are available. Of course, context is everything. What we try to do in the way that we design both our hardware and our software and our digital products is we need to build the ability to sort of pivot to the context, right? So whether that is accessories that can be changed, locally manufacturing products that are more specific to the context. So for example, we manufacture in Lesotho for Lesotho, we manufacture in Cambodia for Cambodia. In fact, Cambodia is currently shipping to East Africa, as well as we were delayed in our factory setup in Uganda due to COVID, unfortunately. Still looking to set up manufacturing in Uganda for the East African context. But it's looking at how do we make sure that we can tailor something that at its core we know is good to the context. And in that sense, we are also not married to our hardware, and we're very open to learning about different things. We've specifically settled on multi-fuel biomass because historically, with limited other partners, limited fuel distributors, the difficulty of setting these things up at scale, for us, it seemed the smartest idea to start with the distribution of a hardware that can work in any context, see the demand, see what customers themselves say about it, and then start to tailor it to each specific context as we get all that data. We do a lot of customer feedback, we do a lot of data collection, a lot of baselines, we reflect on what impact we've had and what people say. So those things are very, very important to us. And then in terms of things like the software ability to pivot and tailor it to the context, our pay-as-you-go is, it's sort of across 3 elements. There's the hardware, which essentially, very simply said, is a countdown timer, and we just tell it how much time it has. There's no way to trick it. There's no other way to tell it other than through an encryption through a mobile smartphone app that we have. Now, we can turn it on forever, or we can turn it on for 3 days or 30 days or whatever our database says. And our database is cloud-based. It communicates through the customer-facing app. That means that we can sell in a context where people buy it cash and it works forever and we have no more influence on it. It also means we could do in, for example, a camp context, that every time you pick up your specific fuel type that we're trying to encourage people to use, it adds a certain number of days to the usage of the hardware that you are essentially leasing. And that way you can keep a much stricter level of control on what is the source of fuel, what is the way that people are using it. We could even monitor the exact usage levels of that product. Our technology is built to go from either end, total hands-off to really incremental micromanagement control of something, because we know that in every different context, we're going to have to meet different needs. So by keeping the technology really flexible, we can work together with partners in their specific context where they have the expertise and tailor it to their needs. Challenges wise, as that was the question, I believe, the difficulty is being involved in the design process. So often private sector is painted very broadly with the same brush, regardless of whether you are a startup scale up in the local context or if you are a large global corporate overlord. Often private sector, that's the label, right? So we're sort of more like deeply ingrained in the context, you know, been actively working at the workshops and following closely on GPA to really understand, you know, what are the needs and things like that, and to understand the context, work together with organizations that we know have the expertise that we don't. This is why we're working with CARE and KRC. It's why we have approached many other organizations. It's the collaborative design element that I think needs to be more there. That's why I love being involved in this webinar. I think it's not so often that as like a rep from a specific company, I can come in and tell you guys about how we do things and what our opinion is. I think that's fantastic and really appreciate being here for that reason. And then it's the investment space. So they're especially in sort of, emerging markets and humanitarian context, the perception of risk is very, very high. And so not only do we adopt a lot of risk as private sector to test these models and to roll out in these markets, often the funding is only either project-based, and Ben highlighted some of the key issues with that, the shorter terms and really adopting quite a high risk as a business entity. But also because of those very high perceived risks, more traditional finance streams are also very difficult, and the investment space for clean cooking, which has been sort of quite narrowly defined for something that is, you know, a third of the world's energy need. A third of the world still relies on biomass for cooking, but we've made it this sort of niche sector.
Juliet, since we are also coming close to time, so if we could just wrap up the key points, that would be great.
Essentially, the investment space is sparse compared to the size of this issue in this context. That was my main point, and I think, yeah, so the takeaways being collaborative design on how these things are implemented, also with private sector, and then perhaps more amplification of the work being done so that there is more interest and more risk mitigation for investors who want to follow more traditional investment streams into this sector.
Thank you so much. And since we heard from the market side, from the humanitarian organization side, I think what we missed is hearing from the policy side. So Konzit, I want you to be back on the screen so that you could tell us more from the policy side. What are the challenges and how there are opportunities for the policy to influence the sector?
Yeah, thank you. Sure, the challenge in humanitarian setting to promote clean cooking solutions are wider, but apart of them, the absence of comprehensive or all-encompassing policy could be one of the major things. For instance, the Ethiopian National Energy Policy Draft, which was issued in 2013 by the Ministry of Energy. This policy is not focusing, enforced because it is not yet be approved by the Council of Ministers. And the policy does not address directly minority and vulnerable groups and their special circumstances. This includes vulnerable households living in degraded area, refugees and IDP, as well as the host communities. In addition, the global strategy for safe access to fuel and energy safe which is developed by UNHCR in 2014, despite a very useful information and strategy direction to address the energy and environment issue of refugee in the country. This policy also has not been well communicated by relevant government stakeholders, nor integrated to the national sector strategies. Safe strategy, we know that it's under development as well, and we should also be updated in light of the current national and international integrated policy for refugees, and also needed to be adopted into the national energy sector strategy after endorsed by mandatory sector organizations. Another issue could be that the lack of ownership, because of lack of strategy, a lack of ownership is also visible. The issue of clean cooking in refugee camps or humanitarian settings hangs in the balance, and it appears that implementing organizations are not fully committed to making it their priority. The implementation of clean cooking solution is connected to some implementing organization whose major interest is in delivering or providing food. And because food without cooking energy is unavoidable, the institutions are involved in some way in attempting to meet the need. But promoting clean cooking solution needs more effort than this. Another issue could be that the lack of focus also has been seen. Despite the fact that the energy issue is still there, many institutions have overlooked the cooking solution in favor of lighting solution. Access to electricity or energy supply for refugees is at the top of the list now, we know, and lighting is for most. But many implementing agencies, like when it comes to energy, cooking is somehow overlooked. And it can be seen from many reports that even implementation report, if we can see many related to energy supply at refugees are dwelling on lighting issues. The other could be this short-term planning. Many implementing agencies have short-term plans, sometimes such little as 2 years. And in order to reach the desired outcome, the issue of energy and environment solutions cannot be handled in a short period of time. Instead, a lengthy and sustainable strategy is required. One opportunity could be that the national policy is again under revision, and like a couple of months before, it has been discussed by stakeholders and still open to stakeholders to contribute to that strategy policies. So the stakeholders, we've got still a chance to contribute to this strategy document. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Conjit. Now I'd like to move to Joella as someone who has directly worked with the refugee communities. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities do you see in the sector?
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity again. Let me say, yes, of course, I've worked with refugees, and I myself as a refugee, I also feel, being part of, the whole ecosystem. Coming to challenges, yes, there are a lot of challenges, and I think on the side of service providers or partners who are operating on the ground, Ben has tried his best to highlight the major challenges that I myself have witnessed. But on the other hand, I can just add on top of that, from my own experience, there is more of capacity building lacking on the ground, because most of the time you will find that investors or private sector are coming with their products and try to just come up with a short term training just to introduce their products, in the market, but not really investing in the human resources that are, available there to maximize and cut costs on, some of their budgets. And then that has been a major challenge on my hand. And personally, as someone who's been involved in energy a lot in different ways, I also feel like, there is not that there is that lack of, long-term investment into, refugees themselves, because as Diana can agree with me, that protracted situation of, refugees spending a lot of time in displacement settings, is now a major problem to UNHCR, and UNHCR is looking forward, durable solution. And one of the solution is local integration, and look at, because the reality is that refugees going back to their countries, it's another story which is not really working currently. So as UNHCR is working at durable solution, and one of the solution is local integration, and looking at the private sector, or those who are coming up with energy solutions, they're not really thinking in that perspective, trying to support or train consumers in the way that they can be able even to run the project itself without the intervention in the future, and being able to develop or continue the project on their own if possible. I think that's one of the solution, one of the problem that I've witnessed myself. And maybe talking a little bit about another problem is participation. There are less consideration, let me say, there is less consideration of the local community coming to the really critical part of each project, let me say, coming to energy itself, for cooking, for other fields as well, because the capacity of the consumers is still low, and they still need to invest. And I think those who are really concerned are trying to to skip that stage, and bring experts who can just do what they want for a short period of time, and launch their project. And talking about opportunities, yes, there are so many opportunities. Personally, I can just highlight on there is a big needs coming to cooking energy, because people are still in need. They still look at what can be sustainable and practical and affordable, available as well in the local markets. So that's a big opportunity. The other big opportunity is that I think in the last few years, UNHCR has tried to to open doors to private sector to jump into refugee camps to do their works there. That's a big opportunity, because they can be able to expand their markets and their audiences and clients in one way or another. So I think that's also an opportunity that I can try to highlight on that note. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Joel. And I'm also looking at the time. I see we are 4 minutes close to closing. That's quite bad for us, because now we can't go to the Q&A session. But I think we had a great discussion, and it's clear that there are a lot of synergies among different actors, and the challenges that are also common across sectors. So that means we can also join hands together and work on it. Since we cannot take any more questions for today, but to our audience, thank you for sending those, and we will make sure that we document those in written form. So we will make sure that those questions get answered, and you have links to the written answers. So thank you once again. And I think it would be great for our audience to have few takeaways that they can take with them, and then they reflect back after the webinar. So for that, I would first like to close this panel. Thank you to everyone. And then I would like to invite my colleague, Mark Gibson from GPA UNITAR, who is going to give us few closing statements or takeaways from this webinar. So Mark, if you could just switch on your camera, and for everyone, the other panelists, if you could switch off your camera.
Great. Thank you. Renisha, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me crack on in shortness of time. You can read all about me in the slide below, but I wouldn't bother. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you to everyone that's participated in today's discussions. I think what's come out very clearly that there is no silver bullet for cooking in displacement settings. And, if there was, we wouldn't be here today having these discussions. But it's been really interesting to listen to the views and points of the various stakeholders on today's call. For me, I've scribbled down a sort of few key takeaways that I'd like to share with you, and anyone that's worked in this space for a while will probably see nothing new. And really, that's why we're having these discussions, and I'll come back to that at the end. I think while working in displacement settings, we're working with some of the most vulnerable people, and we need therefore to really consider protection-focused approaches. We cannot ignore this. We also need to maximize that fuel, stove, food, and cultural nexus, which will vary between the countries and the settlements, but it's really necessary. And as mentioned by one of the panelists, you know, it's not really necessary to do a full reassessment, but to pivot around what you know really works, and just to make sure that that's still the case when we go to new areas. We also need to be conscious of the supporting ecosystems, such as the right to work, having access to documentation, the ability to access savings and mobile money, because it's these types of tools and that really provide a supporting context for the private sector-led solutions. And on that, you know, we talk about private sector a hell of a lot. And, you know, that really raises our expectations, you know, and then coming to us and providing solutions. But it's not easy for them to enter the space, especially when there are concerns over, you know, balancing protection risks against delivery of commercial goals and trying to establish a market in a situation where we're always considering the ability or the willingness to pay. So a lot of work needs to be done and advocated for where these markets exist to bring the private sector to these and support them in this work. But we mustn't forget, as Joel mentioned, that people of concern should be at the center of all the solutions, to be part of the design and testing phase, and consider their feedback before we scale up. And where relevant, engage with the private sector as soon as possible, so that the needs can be considered and we're not just rolling out the same old cooking projects. I think it's also become very clear that we need to just demonstrate that displacement settings are not short-term entities. They have a long-term lifespan. We need to convey that and consider long-term impacts and goals and work towards those. And that really sort of comes to my sort of final closing points where, you know, I'm going to wrap up coordination, policy, capacity building. These are really important in developing sustainable solutions. We need to make sure that our planned cooking intervention doesn't impact others that are ongoing in the settlement or neighbouring settlement and crash what others are trying to achieve. I think we also need to consider our work to make sure that it's consistent with host government policy, not just towards refugees, but also their overarching energy policies. And we must make sure that there's enough skilled technical support in these contexts and available across the long term, as we've heard, is really significant. I think that's really my summary for today. But I'd just like to sort of have a quick reminder that this is the first of a series of workshops. And I just want to say we're not naive enough to say that we can find a solution for cooking in displacement settings over 4.5 hours of workshops and discussions. But what we're really keen to do is set a foundation for this topic and also to identify what practitioners need in the field so we can support you with solid tools that can allow us together work towards sustainable solutions in displacement settings. So thank you once again to everyone that's participated, and especially thanks to the panelists that have been participating in today's discussions. Thank you. Back to you, Renisha.
Thank you, Mark. And a few closing words from my side. First of all, thank you to all our panelists and speakers for your amazing insight, the variety of knowledge that we had today. I'm pretty sure our audience benefited a lot from that. And thank you to you, our audience, for staying with us till the end. A few quick reminders. As Mark mentioned and also Natali mentioned at the beginning, it is a series of the webinar. So we are coming back with our second webinar and you can already register for it. My colleague has just dropped the link to register in the chat box. So please do register for our second webinar. And we will also share the webinar documentation. That means the recording and presentation from today in a follow-up email that will be sent to you tomorrow afternoon. And along with that, when I close the webinar today, a survey will pop up. Please use the survey and tell us your feedback. It's only 4 questions, and we really want to get your insights because we want to shape the 2 webinars based on your insight and what is shared on the survey. So with that, thank you so much. I wish you a good day, and until next time, thank you and bye-bye.